like they used to. Can't place your bets on the 9 to 5. Things don't work like they used to. No, there's not enough to keep you alive. In the clouds, I can make you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is a retired police officer who spent time working specifically with the murder squad in the Metropolitan Police. He regularly participates in after-dinner speaking events. His name is Danny Button. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hi, how are you? Very well, thank you.
It's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure. Thank you for appearing on the show. Massive shout out to James, aka Gay Elvis, for setting up this interview. So thank you, James. I'm just going to jump straight in with this. I think it'd be fun to just kind of see your journey with the police. So where did the journey with the police begin? Like, why did you want to become a police officer?
Okay, sounds like a good place to start. Can I just add before then, thank you to you for inviting me on. This is an amazing opportunity for me. But also, can I just say a huge big thank you from me and the public to the ladies and gentlemen in blue of the police who do a fantastic job, which I think they don't get enough credit half the time. But I just wanted to put that in first because I am very, very grateful to them. Where did it all start? It started back in the late 80s, very late 80s. I'll give you a little bit of a sneak into that kind of story because I joined the police in the early 90s. I've always wanted to help people, always liked engaging people, meeting new people and helping people. And that's really why I joined the police, and to be able to help them and see their enjoyment at the fact that police officers arrived when they're in their most need. Really, for me, at the very, very beginning, helped it all out. And then obviously from there, you work out other ways that you can help people. And it went from there, really. But yeah, late 80s, I joined the Met. I became an officer, early 90s. And it went from there for 23 years.
23 years.
I know, right? I know, right? Glutton for punishment, as they say.
So obviously, you wouldn't have started in the murder division straight away.
No.
No. So can you kind of like break up for me your 23 years in the police? Like, what do you start doing and like how long does that last? Like, break it up for me a little bit.
Yeah, of course I can. So the first 3 months is in the police training school, which is in a place called Hendon, Collingdale, North London. You do about 3 months there. You learn all your absolute basics, and then you suddenly get thrown into the real world, which is a bit of an eye-opener, I can tell you, especially for me. Just to give you a quick little insight into that one. I'm in training school. You go for all your exams and things, you pick up as much as you can do. It's really good time, actually, apart from the fact it's long hours and huge amount of exams at the end of it, as I think you'd expect a police officer to do as well. I then get out. My very, very first time was out, and my training officer asked me to go on a police car just so I could know what it's like to communicate on a radio whilst the sirens are running. So I went on that. And the very first call that we had was there was a dead body in the River Thames. I thought, that was me thinking I was doing traffic duty. So we pulled up alongside, and unfortunately, yes, we pulled the unfortunate person out of the river. And then the rest of the day was not only making sure that his dignity, but also telling his family and friends. So that was the very first day. And then after that, I was dealing with parking tickets. So it goes from one extreme to the other. So that's my first day out of training school after 3 months. I know, right? You do the first 2 years as a probation officer, which is uniform, doing absolutely everything you can do to get the experience, whether it's front office, whether it's sitting on an empty building doing a night duty, all these sort of things. And you are told to take it all in, ask as many questions as you can, because after 2 years, you're expected to then start doing things off your own back, for want of a better word. After 4 years, I made rows into becoming a detective. At first, once you do that, you deal with different departments, burglary squad, domestic violence, this, that, and the other. They like you to have 2 to 3 months on every single unit available to investigate. And then at some point, probably 10 years in, And I was looking at domestic violence and murder. That was my two main ones when I was in the squad: domestic violence and murder. And then I went into the murder squad for the last probably 10 years of my 23 years.
It is interesting, like how it's structured and handled.
Yes.
Like, forgive me, this is a crude example, but there's a famous video game called LA Noire. It was made by Rockstar in I think the late 2000s, early 2010s, and it was kind of like a fascinating look at policing. So I suppose what it might have looked like in the sort of 1940s time. But the thing that I found interesting was how it moved from department to department, and often when he was sort of investigating a case that looked like it might be something else, it was immediately taken away and gone, no, this is different jurisdiction. You're doing whatever, parking tickets, or maybe you're doing arson or something.
Yeah.
Take me back to that first day where you're training, you're doing parking tickets, and then you get called out onto this thing. So obviously you had like a commanding officer with you,
yes,
who's just makes a call, an audible, if you like, to bring you along for that.
Yeah.
Is that like normal in the police? Does that happen often? You kind of have to be prepared for anything that might be outside of what you're already being tasked to do?
Oh, absolutely. You have to think of so many more things than the 999 call you're receiving. Because while you're dealing, for example, with a motorist on the roadside or a deceased, shall we say, you've still got members of the public who are going to come up to shake your hand, say thank you, and to push you in the back saying we hate you. So you've got to deal with all that as well, whilst also dealing with the incident you're actually occurring with there and then. But you do get a training officer, I don't know what they're called now, but you do get a training officer with you for the minimum of the next 6 months, just so that you can watch what they do, then you can do it yourself on the next occasion. And then when they think that you are in a position where you are providing a service and not going to get hurt, because you obviously know how to deal with both at the same time as that, you then start going out on your own. So there is a lot of training involved, and there's a lot of circumstances where people have your back, for want of a better word. Yeah. I mean, I can remember the first time I went out on the streets, it was actually Kingston upon Thames, which I thought is a nice, lovely area, quite affluent, for want of a better word, and the crime wasn't the highest in Surrey or London around that kind of area. And again, you really do realise very, very quickly how people are happy to voice their opinions, whether it's positive or negative, I have to say. But the overall helping people, and eventually, because when I first joined, I was there to help people. I didn't really know the concept of putting people in prison. I was there to help people and deal with the minor stuff, I suppose. It's not until you're in the police for a certain period of time, I would say probably 5 years, that you suddenly realise that to help people is actually get the naughty people off the streets or rehabilitated, as what's happening more then than it is now.
So see, you can get abuse at any time.
Yes.
If you take like a night out, for example, you got a load of drunk people. Like, how do you draw the line between, okay, this person needs to be booked versus this person just needs to just be told to shut up and go away? Like, where is that line, and how does an officer decide that?
I like to think, and most of my colleagues at the time would probably say as well, if you're talking negative to a police officer, it doesn't help when other people are watching that, because it can make them think, oh, they can get away with it, whatever. I think you've got to read your audience, which I probably will say quite a lot. You've just got to read the audience, let people have their opinion, as long as they're not overdoing it with swear words and threatening words. And after a few minutes, if they then calm down because they've told you what their grievance is, everything's okay. If they then escalate it, I think they were going to escalate anyway, and that's when you have to have more of a word with them. But I like to think that, yes, you can criticise police, as long as you do it in a professional, decent way.
But when it comes to those situations and someone's pushing you, maybe deliberately.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been in a situation like that where you can see someone's, they might be looking for a fight, maybe they're trying to push their luck. I know there's obviously individual discretion between officers, but I mean, like in your day, like how would you approach situations like that?
Personally, if I felt I'm always going to go into every incident, make sure I don't get hurt. That's the main one. Me and my colleagues do not get hurt. We do not get paid to get hurt. That's the first line. Second, though, we keep customers as happy as possible, because as long as they don't put a complaint in, for example, and I'm talking about serious complaints, not the silly complaints that most police officers have to go through, then you found that line with your audience of the perfect conflict management scenario. If I have to go to the next level up, which is get back, for example, which is one of the procedures that we would do, if they go into my personal space, they're going to get either severely warned or arrested. It's as simple as that, because my personal space is a personal space. If they don't go into personal space, I see it more as lip service, for want of a better word. They're saying a few words, maybe trying to keep their friends happy. And normally, with people who are swearing, shouting, and causing some kind of aggression, if they haven't got an audience, they stop virtually straight away. I don't want to be their audience. I'm happy to listen to what they've got to say, but I'm not going to be their audience. But if they then decide that they need to take it up another level or to assault an officer, i.e. I provided my safe space, you come in that, you may well have handcuffs as you like to piece a jury.
And when it came to those extreme situations, like, okay, a guy's thrown a punch, is it kind of like anything goes at that point, like self-defense rules, or is it more just kind of like you're told, no, we just have to apprehend them and contain them? Like, what's the kind of rule in there?
Yeah, no worries. Under the law, you can defend yourself using the minimum reasonable amount of force used in it. You still have to make a statement, and you still have to justify that. The way I personally look is, if I could justify it to a court or a jury, I'm fine, because it probably won't get that far. And I'm the one that wants to tell my story to the jury to find me either guilty or not guilty of assaulting that person. Plus, if you know what the law is, you can better understand where your limits are.
How did you manage your emotions in situations like that? Like, okay, a guy's trying to antagonize you. You know he's doing it on purpose. You know he's trying to get a rise out of you or make a joke of the situation. Obviously, I know it's your job and there's that in mind, but you know, you're a human being.
Exactly, of course you are.
How did you manage your emotions in those moments?
That's the negative. I think for me and a number of my friend officers where we're in there, you kind of lose your emotion a little bit, as in I'm more of a uniform than a person at that particular moment in time, because I'm having to make sure that I don't break the law, because that's what I'm there for. I'm there to uphold the law and keep the law. If people want to call me names, which I don't think is right, let me just put it out there. But if it does, it's got to be like a bit more over your head. Ignore that. Think about why they're doing it. They're doing it in the uniform. All right. They might hate police. I happen to be a police officer. And that's the way that you actually deal with it. In terms of the actual physical, you tend to find that when people have lost their mind, and when I say that, let me clarify that. If they're angry at you and they like the taste of the anger and they want to get more and more angry at the uniform, they tend to not be their natural, usual character, which means they are going to be more liable to be, if you need to actually put handcuffs on them or restrain them, it's much easier to do it at that stage. So if I was to try and put handcuffs on you now, it'd be much more difficult because you're with it, you're alert, you know what you're doing. If you lose your mind by your aggression towards somebody, you've not got all your faculties in that moment in time, it's much easier for us to deal with it that way. But I do understand where you come.
What year did you retire, if you don't mind me asking?
Let me have a little think about it. It was 23 years. I think it was 2016. I think it was about that.
Okay, so 10 years ago. So lots happened in that time.
Cool.
One thing that I found quite interesting, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it. So there are these people they call themselves auditors, right?
Yes.
So you're all aware of this.
Yeah.
I'll just explain for the listeners. Basically, an auditor, as best as I can understand, is a person who will walk around with a camera, and it might be, normally it's visible, it might be on their chest, they might just have their phone out. Obviously now we've got people with like these Google glasses and Meta glasses,
aren't they? With the
yeah. And I'm just going to give my opinion, what I've seen. I think it's people being deliberately antagonizing. And obviously the way they cut up their videos is they might be walking down the street, it looks calm, and then suddenly this person is enraged or annoyed. Maybe not directly because of this person, but they always seem to capture that. I've seen instances where people have ran towards the issue.
Yeah.
And I've also seen a lot of police officers being filmed, and I always found that kind of interesting because often in these instances, if the police are there, they're obviously managing either crowd control or they're about to arrest someone, something like that. I always kind of looked at it like, that's surprising to me that you're able to film someone, a police officer, during a moment like that. I've noticed different police officers handle it differently. So some are like, they just ignore them. And I've been told in some cases that that's the information they're given is just ignore them, just whatever. In other instances, they'll be like, please back up, please get out of the situation. And in other instances, they'll confront them. They'll be like, why are you filming? What are you doing? Which is perfectly reasonable. Even just not being a police officer, just why are you filming me? Yeah. Now, I don't know that you would have experienced that personally, but during your time, but what do you make of that as a police officer? Like you've been there, you've experienced that. Now people are getting filmed while they're doing the job. What are your thoughts on that?
Probably split to two different angles. The first is, my first reaction is, if you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind being filmed. And I look at it from that point of view. Police are public servants. And so what there is in that respect shouldn't be a huge amount wrong with them being filmed in that. The negative that I would say is, and I can give you a couple of examples in a moment as well. Most people will film 8 to 10 seconds after the incident has started. The main bulk of the evidence of what's happened happens within 6. So they're only getting the response from public or police to what's happened, not the actual incident itself. And I do find that a little bit concerning. Plus, with the rules and laws of evidence, we can't just have members of the public filming evidence because that evidence has to go through the courts if there's a charge. And would that member of the public like their phone being taken away from them for that evidence purpose? I don't know.
This raises a fascinating question as well. Let's suppose it's, I don't know, you're in an alleyway. It's a night out. Someone has assaulted someone, so they're being arrested, and people have maybe filmed the incident. They're filming what's going on. Maybe they're doing auditing. Where does the law start on that? Can you make a claim? I mean, they are like, technically, the law states you can film in the public and do whatever you want, pretty much, as long as you don't threaten people, you're not violent with it. I think there's something about you have to blur people's faces out, something like that. So there are like rules, but broadly speaking, you can film anywhere, right?
You can.
Yeah.
The 3 main points where you can't is if you call someone harassment, i.e. you're following them. I wouldn't go as far as say stalking, but you're certainly filming them as the main person. That's called harassment. You're not allowed to do that. But I would say that's probably the minimum of all the amount of people that are going to be doing it. You can't film buildings under the Terrorism Act, especially if they're government buildings or any other buildings. And the person filming may not be aware of what they're filming in terms of a building or something like that. So I would also go along with that as well. But they're the main ones, I think, going on it. What I would say in a more positive area, unfortunately, we have heard times when police have been heavy-handed when they're arresting someone. It's happened both here in the States. We could talk about hours for that, unfortunately. If they're being filmed and something has occurred, you've got evidence against the officers as well. So I do see it from both sides.
Obviously, it's a very difficult time to be a police officer.
Yes.
Yeah, you started the show off by saying something really positive about the police. And I think it would be fair to say these days people have mixed feelings about the police. A lot of it comes down to instances like you've laid out where people have maybe used excessive force, or maybe people feel like the police might have failed them in certain instances. I think the thing that I've kind of realized from it is it really depends on like who are the officers involved or, which constituency, stuff like that. Because people forget it's run by people, and people are good, bad, evil, lazy, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
Like, for instance, I was looking up a case the other day. I don't know. I have a bit of an obsession with true crime, stuff like that.
Why not? Why not?
It's like the psychology of it, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
And it was a stalking case, which was quite interesting, because the laws around this are interesting. I don't know, like, the basic synopsis was this was someone, it was a colleague that they were working with, and they'd given them their number, but they felt uncomfortable about it. But it was like, you know, they in the moment they didn't think anything of it, and then gradually over time, this person starts being obsessive, gets upset about being rejected, whatever, and it kind of evolves from there, right? The interesting thing, the police response to that was, you need to have said in a message specifically like these words, and it was something like, "I'm not happy with you doing that. I refuse," something to that effect.
Yeah.
And the whole time this woman was in contact with the police, giving them information, showing them all this stuff. She had to build up a case over, I think, about 3 months before they would take the case. But the thing that blew my mind a little bit was when they brought them to the actual flat after this person had tried to break in and had successfully broken in. They were querying it like, "Oh, there's no way they could have got in there," and so on. And this woman was kind of illustrating, well, if you look in the shower, there's like, you know, there's blood everywhere. This person's cut themselves, etc., etc. They've stolen things.
Yeah,
it was a lot. Yeah. My question to you is, in those instances where the police do sort of let us down, how do you go about managing that? Because obviously, you know, from a public relations perspective, it's really bad, and it does sway public opinion. And
of course,
you know what I mean? It's people lose trust, people get aggressive towards the police. I personally, I'm very like 50-50 on it. You know, there's instances where I see police and I feel like I'm glad to see them. There's other times where I'm a bit like concerned.
Yeah, I hear you.
How, being that you were on the other side, you were a police officer, you were dealing with this. Whenever there's like a big thing that hits the police PR, like how do you respond to that?
I think with compassion and read the audience to start off with. Every person you meet may well be a victim of a crime, or they may know someone who's been a victim of a crime. And I think the incidents where someone comes up to you and complains and moans to you, for want of, moan doesn't sound a nice word, but complains to you for want of a better word, it's very, very rare that they've never had experienced the negativity. So if someone's coming up to you to say, "My friend, me, whatever," and you guys didn't do anything, there's a bit of compassion there. The negative, which I don't think helps the police, is I would love to be able to stand there for 5 minutes and explain why the police did nothing if they didn't, what the problem is, and the fact that 90% of the time it's not the police's fault. And I'm not trying to defend them in any way, shape or form, because you've got to remember, whatever the police do, the evidence is then taken up by the courts, and it's the courts that decide what happens, not the police. So the police have been there. Once the police have been at a scene, they become a witness, because then the solicitors and the courts take over and the police have no power to change anything from there. But going back, because I'm not here to brush off the incidents, things like that, but harassment, unfortunately, is not the greatest offence going, because Parliament didn't really give the amount of sentencing that they need to do. Harassment can be one very long incident. It can be an incident that happened over a couple of months, but it's normally a minimum of 3 incidents. And anybody who's been involved in domestic violence and other family will know it only takes 1 incident before a serious injury. So unless we're talking about assault, and clearly I don't want to go and getting injured, harassment doesn't always lead to the best course of action, apart from a warning, and then you can take it civilly. So when it comes down to domestic violence, which I've also dealt with, because that was one of my 2 departments that I mentioned earlier on, you can go and get an injunction against the person, which has nothing to do with the police. It's total civil, which means that if we believe something's going to happen and assault has not taken place, they can go to the High Court and get an injunction. If that's breached, it's an immediate custodial sentence for them. So there are other ways that we can deal with it. Do police always know about that? Not necessarily, but about 6 years of experience in the domestic violence unit to understand that's another course of action. The other thing that probably most police officers will tell you is the disappointing part. If we get called out to an incident and the victim, thank you, why didn't you come here? Why didn't you do it? After a few hours, they say, "Oh, I don't want to do a statement anymore. I don't want to take them to court. Leave it." And that can be frustrating because we know that a person who might do it again, who is likely to face a prison sentence if they go to court, and now the victim doesn't want to know, which happened 80% of the time that I was in there. So, yeah, it's finding the balance.
Would you say it's a little bit like Stockholm syndrome?
Yeah. So now that the law changed as I was leaving to basically say that if you take a minimum statement from the victim the minute you get there, okay, you want to tell me what's happened, just write it down here or let me write it at the very beginning and then we'll leave it. Put it to one side, we leave it. I'm just going to take a picture of your injury to show what I saw when I first walked through the door. They take a picture of your statement. That's sufficient for prosecution. But how many officers do that when they first arrive? They normally wait a couple of hours, which means you've lost evidence.
That's interesting.
Mm.
I can see the logic behind it, but then of course, if someone's in a situation like that, they're probably hysterical, or you know what I mean. So
yeah, absolutely.
You do have to kind of get the person calm before you can even take a statement, I imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, another way of doing that is that you call for an ambulance. Now, they're unlikely to go to hospital because they don't want to leave their house. Might have kids. But while they're there, they've got a paramedic. I don't remember last time a paramedic was horrible to somebody. So you've got a paramedic, maybe same sex, for example, who can turn around and say, how are you? Done this before, know how it is. Let us make sure you feel comfortable. And at that point, when they know they're receiving help, police go and take a quick, how did it happen? So it's time management. It's working out when is the best time to do what. If someone said, I hate you, police, you did nothing before, they probably say, can you help us? They're going to say, you know what, with the help, for want of a better word. But if you do time management, then you never know what you might be able to get at the time.
In the media, as in TV and film, we often see that in instances where the person's been taken to hospital, either a criminal or a victim, there always seems to be a lot of barriers for entry. Like police are not allowed; they have to get permission to come in, to take statements, to do stuff like that. Now, given that paramedics are there to help people and physicians are there to help people, probably pretty common that they will talk to them and the person might reveal things. So I guess my question is twofold. One, what are you allowed to kind of get evidence from them? And then secondly, how do you go about kind of getting the permission to then see a victim or a criminal in the hospital or something like that?
This will open up a wider conversation that we may have in a minute as well. But when you get into a hospital, they've got their client privilege. If you talk to a doctor, the doctor won't allow to tell us. Plus, even if the doctor did, it's called hearsay evidence, which would be inadmissible basically at court. So what you do is you ask the doctors if you can speak to the patient, and whatever they say, as long as they're not on drugs, as in, when I say on drugs, that sounds really, really horrible, doesn't it? What I mean is hospital drugs and things like that, or drunk, then you can take your statement. But so we do get information from hospitals about where they might be, what condition they're in, how they were when they came in, and what drugs are in their blood system. And from there, we could decide when a statement can be taken, when not. But we can't go any further when it comes down to medical stuff.
Okay, let's move it forward. To talk a little bit. I just want to sort of put a bow on the domestic violence issue. The numbers are still high. I think during this last World Cup, it was estimated that they would be a certain amount because during, say, football events, this violence seems to spike.
Yes.
The point at which you're being brought in as a police officer typically will mean it'll be either one or two things, I would imagine. Either the violence is very much underway and has been for a long time, and this is the victim's kind of last resort, cool. Or it might be the beginning of something, and now you're having to kind of explore that and see how far it goes, or is it the beginning, is it the middle, etc. So you were in this unit for a while. So how did you, say, typically approach a case like this? You know, what was the police approach to domestic violence cases?
Obviously, let me start by saying that we believe every single victim, no matter how many times they made a report to us, because it's very, very important to do that. Some victims don't think we listen, but we actually do. We have to look at standard of evidence and their safety. So in other words, what we would first do is see if the the victim can move out the house, go somewhere else potentially, other family, friends, things like that. Even if it really comes bad, you go into the safe houses, for want of a better word. We'll go into more than that because we don't know what them identified, et cetera, et cetera. The other way of looking at it is if we've managed to get the evidence against a suspect, I personally look to get them locked up before the court the earliest opportunity. And the court do look at it quite favourably in terms of, we'll give you a couple of days custodial sentence to either realise what you've done you can't do, or allow time for the victim to make other arrangements to get out of that cycle. But regrettably, and I do desperately mean this as well, you're probably looking at about 75% repeat offending.
Do you think that's just because like people like that are just inherently violent and there's just no chance of rehabilitation?
I think it's got to be about both in some respects. This is not putting blame onto anybody, but there is also a big culture I found in the country, no matter what offences are, of habit. Once you're with somebody, you want to stay with them, no matter what they do. You'll put up with a certain amount to stay with them because the good times are good, no matter how bad the bad times are. You might have kids and the kids want to see daddy or mummy, because it's both ways, but predominantly, let's face it, is actually going to be male. And when the woman leaves, because I've spent a lot of time with women who have left to go to other safe havens, things like that, they miss them incredibly. And I do get that. I really do get that. And then they look down at their arm and see a cut and think, but I don't miss that. And they've then got to make that decision between the two, if you're talking it from that point of view. From the men point of view, because most domestic violence is caused by men, I would say most of them is because of drink or drugs. And I would still say alcohol beats the drugs in the fact that they get drunk, they go back to a normal pattern. Maybe the victim hasn't pressed charges or gone further to almost penalise them, for want of a better word. And I believe sometimes they think that's the right thing to do. Yes, they might have other issues, which unfortunately this kind of thing isn't great regarding mental health and things like that. I get all that. But I think the signals is a part of it.
What about in instances where maybe the perceived victim is lying? Obviously, you won't know that initially.
Correct.
How do you approach a situation like that? Because obviously you won't know. So this, as far as you're aware, this person's a victim, and as you said, you believe the victim first. But let's suppose they're lying. Like, how would you approach that? How do you know?
You don't, but you go by their reaction. How scared are they? How do they think you've just been involved in another incident? Have they got any injuries to them at all? Did the neighbours hear anything? Are the kids say anything? Let's say 3 to 5-year-olds don't really tend to lie too much. They give you a good indication of what's going on. So there's lots of evidence apart from the victim that you can obtain to find out something went on. And even just let's say the victim makes out, just for example, that she's been punched. And actually it was just a real heated argument. Heated argument can still be common assault, still be a breach of the peace. You can still arrest someone for that. So you have to look at the actual evidence and which will clear a court. Because the ultimate thing, once you realise someone is safe, it's not about what the police want to know. It's not what the police think happened. It's about what you can prove in court. And that's the bottom line to do it. So they're the two margins that I was always looking at as well.
Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate it. Walk me through what it's like being, as the old saying goes, Bobby on the beat, police officer on the streets, soaking it up. I mean, especially when you're on your own, it must be quite daunting, you know? Like you're there, man. Like you're in it. Like it's all around you. You learn very quickly because the bottom line is you should go out. You're proud to wear the uniform, or at least I hope people are proud to wear the uniform. That's why you're wearing it. There is a degree. Even the people that say negatives are still happy you're there because they're safe. It's like most people. I've got many, many stories where people will say nasty things to the police or won't like them. Tell people, I don't like the police, I don't like. But they're the first ones who will dial 999. Which I want to encourage. So the police are aware that even the people that put negative publicity will often dial 999, which is good, because if people stop dialing 999, the country's in trouble. And I don't think we're anywhere near that level, even though I think public happiness with police is at quite a lowest I've known for quite a long time, if I'm perfectly honest with you. But those people will still call the police, which means that you're in a much better position to move forward than that. I must admit, you asked about a single Bobby walking down the street. Again, you read the signs. If
you are friendly, approachable, and dare I say, doing your job, you normally won't come across any aggression. If you're walking down the street thinking, I'm the policeman, you're the public, what are you looking at me for? I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it that way. You're going to get aggression at some point and probably need assistance. Just because someone's committed a road traffic incident doesn't mean to say they have to get a ticket. A warning might do, or move on next time you get a ticket. That kind of thing, which the public want to receive if there's nothing bad like cause of obstruction, someone hasn't been knocked down or something like that. So it's really reading the audience and realizing when the next tier of level comes up. So if you're walking down the street, you might turn around to someone and say, don't park there, move on. You might see two people have an argument. Guys, I know it's hot. I know you might want to argue, but do you really want to spend the afternoon in a police cell? Let's try and enjoy this lovely weather. All the way to a shoplifter who is intent on getting out that store. So you could do with all different types of incidents. But again, the information that comes over your radio will prepare you for whatever you're going to face. But again, you still have to deal with each incident from the beginning because you don't know what the actual incident is. Someone might want to fight store detectives, but not police. Some people might want to escape the store before police arrive. And yes, some people might be in a situation where if I don't fight this police officer, I go to prison. And clearly that's something we have to think about as well.
See, we've both kind of said it today, but the perception about the police is very mixed feelings right now. Who's to blame? Is it governments? Is it just solely the police? Is it something else? Like why do we have this kind of unease with the police right now?
I think without getting political, it's probably down to government. Successive governments, no one in particular. And that is because of the lack of funding that goes in, which both in terms of, let's start with equipment, lack of officers, because no matter who you talk to, whichever part you do, they say, I'll put an extra this amount of officers, I put that. They're all talking out their, because the police numbers are still quite low. And if they had more backup when they dealt with a situation, or better, sometimes more equipment when they deal with a situation, I think that put morale up as well. I remember being where if you dealt with an arrest and your shift was over, you got overtime. Normally between 2 and 3 hours to help cover the paperwork and get their arrest charged so they go to court, etc. But you got 2 to 3 hours overtime. There was a period when I was in it, and I can't speak for the last few years because I'm not in it this close anyway. I'm close with other subjects we may bring up, but not this one. When the next shift come on, they walk from the door and they take over the prisoner to cut the overtime. And you don't, personally, from my point of view, I like to do my own paperwork because I know it's going to be spot on and pass. I don't want someone else doing my paperwork in case they get it wrong. I want to make sure that my person is dealt with until the stage of charge to be put before the court or even a warning. But I want to make sure it's been done properly. And the main reason for that is I've already spoke to the victim and told the victim, I'm going to do this, this, and this. So when you get to the point when another officer comes in and changes the direction, you've got to go back to the victim the next day and say, I'm sorry, I know I promised this, but guess what? It didn't happen. So these things don't help them around.
I'm surprised that's allowed as well. I mean, I would have thought there'd be like a legal thing in place to prevent that because, as you say, like it can completely change the approach for a case. And if you're the officer on scene and you know it's your case, that doesn't seem fair. I don't know.
What uniform officers would normally do is hand the prisoner, I'm going to say prisoner, it's a suspect as a prisoner, they've been arrested, and will then hand them to the detectives or other people who know how to investigate crime. So it does happen. And even though I would give all the great due respect to uniform, if I was having a case, I would want a detective to deal with it because they are trained to deal with investigations, deal with all the elements and make sure it's successful at court. I'm not saying uniform can't do that, but I would much rather a uniform officer was in a car driving on blues and twos for the next person who needs help rather than stuck at a police station, whereas a detective is not likely to run out to someone who needs help.
I've kind of brought it up here and there, but generally speaking, what would you say is your opinion of the portrayal of police in TV and film? Would you say it's accurate? Is it a bit sensationalized and silly? What's your general sort of feeling about it? It
goes through stages. I think 5-6 years ago, it was quite poor. And I have seen the quality go up a little bit, where, just for example, the last thing I saw on the news, I believe, was vigilantes in London going around spraying people, being nicking mobile phones. And that was quite a plus in the fact that they were saying that the police should be dealing with it, trusting the police, and they will deal with it. So that's one of the last things I see. Whereas other times in the past, I've seen people say, well, with vigilantes, there's no police on the street, we've got to take it into our own hands. So I do think it changes quite dramatically. The bottom line will be, though, only the police have the powers and the skills to keep people safe. And if you just want your mobile phone, that's it. Fair enough, I agree with that. There should be a bigger picture in making sure these people are off the streets of London, so mobile phones are not stolen, and only the police can do that.
But like in, let's say, like a TV show that's portraying like how a police officer might approach a case, from the media you would have seen over the years, like, would you say it's accurate, or does it kind of miss the point completely?
No, it's mainly accurate, but I wouldn't always put the blame on the police. Don't get me wrong, you're always going to get bad apples. We've seen this. There are officers that in the last couple of years have got life sentences, things like that. I mean, that's fairly obvious. You're always going to get bad apples when you've got such a big numbers of officers. But I think there's a mixture between, if you're a human being and the morale is low, you walk out the door not the happiest person. How can you then put a smile to your victim? How can you put a smile to someone who says hello? That's very, very difficult, but you're professional enough, you have to actually go ahead and do that. But if those officers attend a scene and they ask for help and no one turns up because there's no officers left, then you can see why it's not their fault. It then goes maybe to government. I don't know who would be in charge of that. So I think a lot of it is accurate, but you just got to find why it's accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I heard the statistic that the budgets were being cut and there was less officers around. I mean, I live in Manchester right now, and I can tell you, like, I rarely see police officers on the beat. Once in a while, it's cool to see. It's, it's like, oh, cool. But it's rare. It's often on days that you'd expect, like a busy Saturday or something. Where you expect that there's going to be crime, probably within the city centre and in certain spots. But I mainly see the police being used for any kind of political demonstrations, protests, stuff like that. Right. And you would expect that. But it's like, that's when I see the most police. Generally speaking, you'd be hard pressed to see the police, and it sucks.
Correct.
But that being said, I hear sirens going off all the time, so there's always something going on.
I was just about to say, so do I. But during this interview, I've not heard one. So maybe we should keep interviewing for another couple of days and no longer any more sirens. But who knows?
It goes. Disco the loophole.
Yes, indeed.
Right. Let's talk about the Murder Squad.
Please do.
Interesting stuff. So, where did you begin with the Murder Squad? How did that kind of part of your police career begin?
It was an interesting part, because normally you have to apply for different departments, show them what your CV is, and show them what skills you're going to bring to the table, especially for when I say big units like that, we're talking about rape units or serious sexual offences, obviously, murder and terrorism. You would have to apply because only certain types of skillful officers can actually do it. And it also means that people just go, oh, I'll join the Murder Squad, and they're not really interested in it. It means you've got to put yourself out to actually apply for that unit. I was lucky because, when I say lucky personally, that an incident occurred where I was working, where the Murder Squad got brought in, and I was attached to the Murder Squad during that investigation, because at that time I was single, no kids, and so I was the only one who didn't say, I've got to be gone by 4 o'clock, I've got a school run, something like that, I can stay as late as I can. So I obviously got kept on the unit from that period of time. I did good work on that incident and stayed with them. And ended up dealing with a number of different murders. So I actually got on it in a slightly different path to what most people would do. But when I was on it, it was incredible fun. Because when I say fun, it was the fact that you're giving the victims and the family of the victims a lot more time. You're giving specialist officers to help them, comfort them, and deal with other bits and pieces that they might need to do, especially when it comes down to coroners and things like that. The investigation, you get more money to deal with it properly, and at the very, very beginning, you get more officers to deal with it properly. So in that respect, that was quite a good time in my career, because you actually felt you was achieving something.
Given the nature of the job, Do you get pre-therapy? Do you get something to prepare you for what you're going to see? Or is it just kind of like that gets dealt with after the fact?
It's after the fact. You can't really tell anywhere, and you can tell people what they're likely to see, but like with all humans, some people brush it off, some people get nervous, and some people say, well, let's wait and see what happens. You can only really, as a senior officer, like detective at the time, and experienced, not senior, experienced officer, is probably the better way of doing it. You do tend to look at your colleagues and see how they're affected by certain things, and at that point, you either speak to them or speak to the senior to make sure they get the counselling, support, and things like that they need. That's pretty much after an incident's occurred, and you'll be surprised how many people can deal with 3 or 4 murders, for example, and then they deal with another one, and just all of a sudden, maybe it's the topping up process, as we like to call it, where you've just seen so much grief from all this that you do need to speak to someone.
All right, take me into the mind of a detective for a second. You've walked on scene. Let's say it's an apartment.
Yeah.
And for you found a body.
Yeah.
And the murder scene is all around you. Suspects nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? Like, walk me through what's going through your head and what you're looking for.
Okay. So go backwards, because normally the deceased is found by the uniform who call you in as a murder squad. So a 999 call will go in, the uniform will turn up no matter what happens, whether they find the body deceased or whether the body becomes deceased while they're there, i.e. they're doing CPR, etc., etc. And then they call the detectives in to establish whether or not it's foul play. So we get there when the cordon's already up, the evidence should be in place, and then we go in and unravel the story of what's happening next. The first thing that we have to do is make sure, the uniform have to do, just to make sure the full picture's done, is make sure that everyone's okay. I know we're talking about someone who's passed, but everyone else is okay. We've got to make sure that medical attention is given to anybody, make sure there's no danger around. It's like people always say to me, what happens when you get there? Someone might still have a knife. Knife is actually not the most times that people die. It's actually different, very touch their head got back down, hit the head on the floor, and have died that way. So weapons are not always in situ anyway. So that's what first happens. Then we have to call in what's known as the CSI, which is the American way of doing things like that. That then introduced the golden hour that a lot of people tell about in investigation. Now, have you heard of the golden hour as a matter of interest from TV programs and things like that?
I think I might have, yeah. But I've always took it with a pinch of salt when it's TV, because I'm like...
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, this is kind of what I was saying before. Like, it seems like it would be accurate, a lot of it. But anyway, please
right,
continue.
Let me explain a little bit then. So the golden hour technically doesn't exist. It's basically is a medical thing. So when you go to hospital, they have the golden hour to make sure they know what's wrong with you, what you've got in your system, and how we're going to keep you alive. And that's what it's based down to. As you could probably imagine, during that medical process, there's things like fluids, they're putting blood into them, they're making sure they got antibiotics, all those sort of things. So the police decided that the only way that they could teach officers to make sure that it's the blood, DNA, and fluids are kept there is to call it the golden hour. So the first thing you do in the very first hour is to make sure that any fluids, blood, DNA, we're all adults here, so sperm, things like that. Anything that's found at the scene has to be preserved either by the police or pointed out to the CSI, who can then do it themselves. So that's the first golden hour. The next 24 hours after that, or the next 12 to 24 hours, is all about making sure we identify any witnesses, make sure the clothing's all bagged up, make sure CCTV, find out if neighbours were in at the time, what cars were there, and all that sort of thing. So it's, even though it is quite time sensitive, it's not as sensitive because obviously CCTV, once you establish where it is, they have to keep it for 31 days anyway as of that date. So as long as you tell them, do not scrub it, we'll be back tomorrow to download it or upload it, that's then what happens in the next 24 hours. The only difference would be when the murder squad, or as it's now known as the serious crime unit, because they now take on missing persons. And obviously with a missing person, it's absolutely crucial to find out as much information as you know about that person. Their last seen whereabouts, who they might have gone to in the first 12 hours as possible. Because certainly if it's a baby, they might start to perish. They might need other medications and things like that. Unfortunately, when you have a missing person who's a young child, it's often, if they're not found within 12 to 24 hours, you don't normally find them alive. So it's really quite important that you do that. And the only reason I bring that up, is we won't dwell on that, is because missing person is what the murder squad now deal with as well. So as you can see, there's quite a lot to be done in the first 12, 24 hours of a murder investigation. Then obviously the body gets taken away, takes down to the coroner, so we can then continue with the next bits and identify who's actually done this. Because even when you say a flat, it could well be the suspect is known to them. It might be the suspect's fled. And then you've got to identify, have we got a dangerous person on the street? Have we got someone arrestable for murder on the street? And we then make inquiries to try and trace that.
Let's assume it's missing persons. That's what you hear in the media a lot is the time scale factor, and there's increasing pressure. Whenever I've seen like interviews with police officers during that time, they seem quite tense. So walk me through like the pressure in that time. Like you've got limited amount of time to try and find this person. And obviously there's the paparazzi is there constantly asking you, they're constantly around the scenes, which is obviously going to be a problem in and of itself. Just walk me through like what's going through an officer's mind at that time.
Extreme anguish. You can't sleep. There's no point going home. You can't sleep. Most officers will have young children, and we'll talk about young child, so they can put themselves into that position of knowing how bad that may be. We also know we are against the clock, but more importantly than that, the first few hours when a child goes missing is the time when you're going to get, as in if someone is to abduct a child and drive them away to where they may perish, for want of a better word, if we don't find them, we've only got about an hour to find that van or that vehicle before they go into that zone. And if they go to, I'm going to say Brighton, because it's the first place I could think of, it just makes it explain a little bit easier. And they're going to drive to Brighton, and ultimately that's where they're going to stay. We're not going to find them. We've got to get them before they get to Brighton. We've got to get them before they leave the Met jurisdiction. Because even though other officers will assist us in Brighton, you've got to explain to them what's gone on. It takes time. So if you can keep it in the Met, where officers know what's going on, we know the circumstances, it makes the recovery, as in finding the person alive, so much more easier. But it is a lot, of course it's anxious. Any crime involving a child that's a victim is always going to be quite high up there, hitting on the nerves as well as the emotion.
What's it like in the office at that point when everyone's kind of working on this case? And, you know, is it like...
The office is an interesting place depending what stage of an investigation it is. I personally don't really like being in the office too much, because while you're in the office, you're not being more productive. While the detectives are working around the clock, doing what they need to do, you think that the hope levels are still going to be there. It's when you realize they've dropped their intensity because it's been such a long time, leads are being chased down that aren't really working. That's when it starts to get a little bit more upsetting, because the chance of finding anyone, let alone alive, comes down a little bit more. So yeah, there is that from point of view. I will say though, to anyone that's watching this, that obviously missing person, by far the majority, I haven't got the figures, but do get found happily alive, and it's normally a mistake. It's the last one I dealt with, quite a long time ago, was actually where the child had gone missing, and the mother had forgot that she told the father the child could be kept for the mobile phone battery ran out, and there was no contact for about 6 hours, which breached their normal arrangement, but it was just literally the mother forgetting to tell the father could go away. So it can be just literally as innocent as that. But the investigation, let me assure everybody, there are so many inquiries that go on behind the scenes when it comes down to this. And if you can't contact an officer, it's normally because they are working very, very hard with leads that we get through, whether it's a registration number, a sighting, or something like that. Yeah.
What was your... Actually, I'll throw another question for you this way before I move on. What did working for the murder squad teach you about the psychology of killers?
Very interesting question. Basically, it's got to be kind of a different level if you're going to take the life of another person, whether it's an accident or intent, first of all. But people do it with intent, because you are going to get instances where a brawl takes place, you've punched someone, and they've unfortunately lost their life as a result of that. That's obviously a story we can go into in a minute, not a problem at all. When you face people who have intended to kill somebody, there are different kind of people completely. Most want to tell you most actually do want to tell you, you do get on the TV, goes, no comment, no comment. They are the ones that, as far as I'm concerned, are not the danger levels. They're dangerous because they've done something, but they're not what I call lifers. And they're the people that went out to do something quite malicious and spiteful, and they're the ones that will never come out of prison. Whereas the first type that I was saying, they've done it. We hope they get rehabilitation. But I don't want to say the word evil because it's not nice for me to put a label on it. But they're the ones that have intended to kill somebody, but could potentially not do it again. So once the system, if it works, you don't know. But there are people out there who intend to do it, who would have no hesitation doing it again if they were released.
Well, let's talk about rehabilitation. It's kind of in the UK, I think it's an interesting one because we've heard of good instances, we've heard of plenty of bad ones.
Yeah.
What are your general thoughts on the UK's approach to rehabilitation in terms of tackling crime?
The intent and the programs are amongst the best in the world, but the execution are the worst. And that's what's quite sad about it. I don't remember the last person who went to prison. I'm going to say more minor offence, although all offences are serious, because if you're the victim of an offence, it's going to be serious to you. I'm talking about minor in terms of the law. Obviously, if you slap somebody, it's called common assault, and that's the minor incident in the law, eyes of the law, not the victim necessarily. But the problem is, because the prisons are so full, not enough staff. I literally was watching someone yesterday afternoon who's the head of the Prison Association, who I think gave one of the best accounts I've ever come across. And I'll come into that in a moment because it's on public record anyway. But because they've got to make sure that the people in prison get their breaks, treated humanely, but because there's so many people in there, the rehabilitation doesn't always kick in straight away. Or some people say they don't get rehabilitated when they're in prison, etc. And I find that quite sad because I think back in the day, it did work because I remember good programs were at Brixton Prison. And people came out of there who didn't go on to reoffend. I mean, this is probably 20 years ago, something like that. And the system has unfortunately changed. So unfortunately, the prison system doesn't work in terms of rehabilitation. The only way I would say, from my personal experience, so I just touched the microphone, I want to actually still hear me, is when there were some dangerous prisoners sent in. They found God, they came out, and they didn't offend anymore, and they wanted to teach youngsters why prison was not the way to go. And I've done a lot of work with them, And whether it's God, whether it's this, that, the other prisoners, they come out and they think, right, I've just found out my girlfriend's pregnant. I have to be a good father. That's what changes them. So there is a goal at the end of it to make these people change. And that's where mostly I think they do.
When it comes to like minor offences, stuff like that, because obviously if you commit like a serious crime, that's going to change your life. Even if you do get out in 30 odd years, you're never going to live a normal life again. But if it is a minor crime, let's say minor theft, something like that, the fact of the matter is there is a big stigma on it. You know, whenever you apply for a job, you have to declare the offences and stuff like that. And let's face it, employers, you know, they might not come out and say it, but they do discriminate and won't employ, offenders. And I'm not saying all, employers, but that exists. How can we tackle that as a society?
That was actually first put into place to deter crime. So if you go to prison, you come out, you're not going to get a job. That was the first aspect of it, which I believe came out in the 1970s. It became employment law in the 80s, as far as I'm aware. I might be slightly wrong on that, on the dates, but that's what they actually did. I don't think you're going to be able to probably have a discussion where most people agree or disagree whether that should be on there or not. I do think that, yes, I do actually agree with giving people a second chance. I do. And that's because I can see that it does work. And if it works for one, it can work for two, it can work for three. But you've also got to remember, I've been in that interview room, I've been in that cell, or not the cell, because you're not allowed in cells, or you've been in that communal area when I go to prison to interview someone, because you're allowed to do that as well, when that person should never be let go at all in any way, shape or form. Right. So that wouldn't really go on them. But I think you need as many tools as you can to help people understand that crime is not the way to go, whether it's religion, whether it is children, whether it is jobs and things like that. Because the ultimate goal is we shouldn't be here to look up people for life. We are here to make sure they're in prison while they're dangerous. once they're not dangerous, which is normally roughly the sentence. Because I don't know if you know, but people that have committed murder, in the psychology, it's roughly 15 to 20 years before they recover. And I know that's why life sentence is 25 years. It wasn't just plucked out of the air. It was psychology and the fact that someone commits intentional murder, it'll probably take them 15 years to come out of the system, 5 years to prepare the street, that's your 20 years. So that's why that sentence was introduced. So I do believe in second chances, but I think you've got to read the individual in particular.
All right, it's a controversial one I'm throwing your way, but when it comes to those life sentences, often people will not be happy with someone getting 25, 30 odd years, because in many instances, they don't often serve all of that. They'll serve maybe 2/3 of that at least. I don't know how you would word it. They'll be eligible for parole at a certain point.
Yes, yeah.
And then in some instances, they get let out. Not all, but in some. Now, if someone has committed like a serious offense and they're getting let out after 20, 30 odd years, and the argument is that this person is unsafe and, you know, a threat to society, how can we really justify allowing them to leave prison based on that?
Very good question. What I would say is no victim of crime will ever be happy with the perpetrator, whether it's themselves or their family being released from prison. But what they've also got to understand, the point of prison is not keeping them there forever unless they're going to come out and commit further offences. The whole point of the prison is to let them come out, get into society, get a job, pay tax technically, and if you want to really go down that route as well, and then be part of society. You also have to remember from cases that from before, where Demo Taylor, etc., there was the young black boy that unfortunately was stabbed and murdered in Peckham. And Stephen Lawrence from Elton, that's why I say those two. There are people, for example, that will go to prison, realise how bad it is, come out, and they are now part of programs trying to help kids on the street not do it.
Mm-hmm.
So in that respect, I would have a number of people out of prison just to let them be form part of that program out on the street. But you're right. If you used to tell me that everyone would be happy with the people that have hurt their family and friends, they'll never say yes, because it's a horrible thing to happen. But I would look at the difference between those that come out and reoffend, who should go back in, but that's the subject that we were just talking about a moment ago regarding the prisons releasing people and things like that, and not. So there are different ways of looking at it and how we can help society.
Yeah, I agree with your sentiments. I think it's a case-by-case thing. I mean, if you had like a young man, he commits a murder, maybe in the heat of the moment, or it's a gang thing, I don't know, and he serves his time, gets let out, and then he does as you say. It's like
I'm not so sure that gangs would come under it. Gangs are there,
for example, maybe he was part of one.
Correct. I think they can help you with the mindset of the gangs, but I'm more talking about the people that committed the crimes outside of gangs, who have done it out of passion or emotion, realise what they did was wrong, and they're prepared to tell other youngsters what their cooling down was, i.e. think to 10, do this, do that, think about that. And that's a way in which you could actually take the violence out of a young.
Yeah, potentially. What would you say in general about these sorts of schemes? Like, would you say there is enough of them? Is it working with the youth, in your opinion, from what you've seen?
I do think it is. I mean, I've just seen a stat which I turned around and said to a group of people, because I do meetings every 6 months to try and help reduce crime in certain areas as well. And I always said that you've got to talk to youngsters like they're adults, not down at them, which I think we've done for far, far, far too long. If you actually try it, because no one had tried it, try it. Talk to these people. They're actually adults. They're going to be doing, if you really want to look at it, it'd be so cynical, they're going to be doing their jobs in 10 years that pays the tax for our pensions. So think of it that way if you want to. But we've got to get these people working on the straight and try and bring our crime bill down as well, whatever you want to do. And it does work, because I've seen kids who have realised that meeting a young lady, having kids, blah, 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 does work. And I've seen it for myself when they actually go ahead and do it. And not saying it's connected, because I don't know enough information. But I saw on Monday a stat that knife attacks in London are down to their all-time low. All-time low. And I also know that these amnesty boxes of knives being handed in, all-time high. It actually started in Manchester 2 weeks ago, and they've had they normally get between 150 and 200,000 knives in during that period. 500,000 knives have been brought in. So touch wood, if it has changed in the way people's mentality, let's hope it has for certainly a few years so we can get things back and running. But I do think some of these programs might actually start to be working.
Now, you worked for the Metropolitan Police. How does working for the Met Police compare to other police forces around the UK?
Interesting. When I was in it, the right didn't talk to the left hand. So if I was working with Surrey, they wouldn't know what's going in with the Met, for example. And you had to do a whole package and do things like that way. They've all got their own systems of working, and I think that's probably right to do that. And the reason I say that is, I don't know what the environment and the community is. I was going to say Manchester. I do actually go to Manchester, so I do know a little bit about Manchester, but I don't go a lot to Liverpool, for example. So I don't know what it's like in Liverpool, and Liverpool will be able to tell London. Likewise, Liverpool should be able to tell London how they do it. So you have to think of the local community, how they feel about things. Do they feel deprived, etc., etc. But I generally think all of them, all of them work well for that community.
Were there any crimes that you were involved in the case for where you had to work directly with other police departments from around the country, and like how did you go about it?
Very interesting. Not so much on work-wise, because when I was a detective, I was in London, and London will feature all sorts of things that are going to go on. So whatever crime there is, it will be involved in London at some way, shape or form. Sometimes they're like, for example, the Notting Hill Carnival, perfect example, okay, which again, we could talk to for about hours. But you do get colleagues from other police forces services coming down because there's not enough Met police officers to cover Notting Hill Carnival. And when they come down, you do find out their experiences. You find out whether or not they're more of a quiet police force, for example. But I do find that in some places, like, I can't think of it, Liverpool and Manchester are quite busy, but other forces will come down and not realise how busy the Met is because they don't deal with that level of crime day in, day out and all the rest of it. And they probably have the numbers of officers to cope with the level of crime that they deal with, whereas I believe that the Met doesn't have anywhere near the amount of officers that I would like to see them have, but I'm sure somebody would argue to the right now, etc. So it is very interesting to speak to your colleagues and find out what the crime is like between here and there. There's always banter. There has to be banter, but as long as it stays in a professional line, that's okay. So yeah, I think it's good to work with colleagues. I like working with everybody. I like just new faces, new people. That's what I think really is the spice of life.
You mentioned Notting Hill Carnival. What's it like policing an event that you know there's going to be crimes committed? Like headed in.
I can't
swear. Because it happens every year. You can swear if you want, but like every year we know for a fact crimes will be committed, and it just baffles me really. But
Notting Hill Carnival, I think, could be described as fucking awful. To be quite honest, I like the concept of it. I do. I like the fact that we've got a fantastic carnival where we're enjoying themselves in London. I think that's absolutely amazing. I don't want to point fingers, but I think it's being run wrong, for want of a better word. It's got too big. I don't think it's been handled very, very correctly in that respect. The fact that houses and businesses have to board up their premises during it tells a bad sign. Officers actually don't want to do it at all.
I get that.
And I've also had an incident where it's changed now, but when I first did it, you actually got asked to drive your car to Notting Hill, park it up, and go into the room. All our cars got smashed because the local youth realised where you were parking. So now we have to park away. I think Croydon was the last one I did, and you get a bus in. If that's happening to emergency services, it can't be.
Yeah, what's interesting is I've noticed in these kind of mass crowd incidents, it's typical human psychology. You get a bunch of people together and the accountability just goes out of the... Like, it's kind of depressing, really. Like, in a lot of protest situations in the UK, let's say over an unlawful crime that's been committed, an injustice, something like that, it will start off as a peaceful protest and loads of people will tag on, and then they just end up smashing up businesses. Looting seems to be a big favorite here in the UK.
Correct.
And I see the same thing happen with Notting Hill Carnival. There's plenty of people that just go to the carnival because they want to celebrate the carnival.
Of course.
And then you just all these other people that ruin it and just trash everything.
On the Saturday, you have most people go there with families. Sunday is more singles, and Mondays is people knowing that you want to fight, go and have a fight. Because forget the police. It doesn't take much to work out on the news that come Monday night bank holiday, you've got all the local youths in the area taking on the police because they think the amount of numbers of police there in riot uniform are going to be. I don't see that happening in many other carnivals across the pond, for want of a better word, or in other places. So I do think with what I've seen personally, carnivals, marches and things like that, they tend to turn sour here more than abroad. I'm not saying all of them, obviously. So yeah, Nottingham Carnival is a different one because I do think the last I knew was that a boy got arrested because they tend to say that the yobs and youths who are doing this, throwing the bricks and things, are local from Nottingham. This is a few years back, and I will more than understand the fact that I have been dealt with this for a number of years. But the last person who got arrested for throwing a brick at a police officer and actually getting arrested for ABH didn't come from Nottingham. So you've got that element that people are going to go far and wide because maybe on the Monday night, it's the ideal opportunity to have a go at the police and maybe get away with it. I don't know. I really don't know what the idea is. But I think it does, maybe it needs to be brought down to one day. I don't know. But when you've got the locals, you've got the police not wanting to do it. It's the only thing I can think of, honestly, where police officers actually say, I don't want to do that. They might say, look, I would rather work with the streets of Lambeth than cover a football match, but we'll do the football match. No problem, because it's part of their duties. But when you get people that don't want to attend, then you tend to think something might be wrong there, but we can only wait.
What about police officers? Because I've seen this over the years where maybe they get involved in a sort of a personable way. I remember one year there was like a police officer who like danced for like a minute in the crowd. And like everyone was criticizing and just tearing it apart and being like, "Oh, this is disgraceful." I disagree. I mean, it's just like human. It's it's kind of a cool thing to see. Police officer just for like 5 seconds is
Yeah,
not
I'm going to be a little bit controversial, not on that, but I'm going to take it over to another level if you don't mind.
Sure.
I think people who are dancing around with the community can only be a good thing. Because at the end of the day, it's the community, it's the children, it's the youngsters. We want to get that connection with the police. So they're not afraid of dialing 999 should they need to. They can create their own memories of the police. So that can only be a positive thing. And if someone goes up to them, the police did this to me. Well, didn't do it to me. I'm happy with it. If you get that, I think that can help. I once saw on Brighton Pride, I believe it was, where a police officer had actually face painted himself as well. I'm not sure I'll go as far as that because that person may have to go deal with another incident in a minute. They've got face paints on them. I'm not too sure. But one thing I did notice the other day was that a police officer had earring, ponytail put up into his cap and a sleeve attack. Now, when I was there, you weren't allowed any of that. And I'm not sure I'd want someone looking like that turn up to a burglary, for example. I could mention loads of other different ones. When I don't know if you can tell, but my hair's quite short at the back. Don't know if you can tell. Made it quite shaved. You weren't allowed to have hair below this line here, your collar line. Well, now they've got ponytails. It may well be the fact that they're having difficulty recruiting, which is yet another subject that we could talk about in a moment as well. But yeah, I think officers need to bring the community in, but there is
with what you were saying there, I think the bigger issue is security. I mean, for instance, ponytails. Look, there's plenty of female officers, but then I've seen female officers that obviously conceal their hair versus ones that have it out. I think it's risky to have it out. What if someone just grabs you, pulls you? Like, do you know what I mean? You're defenseless, right?
Exactly. And that's what part of the program for self-defense is to make sure that you don't leave weapons available. Someone pulls your ear and takes out an earring, that's going to happen. I did once have an officer who said that they were trained in, I can't remember all of them, so I don't want to be disrespectful to it, but it said they were trained in martial arts, and so they could cope with it. you can't use martial arts in self-defense on the streets of London. It's a sport, not a technique. So if you use martial arts to defend yourself in the streets of London, you're probably going to get arrested for ABH, because martial arts is actually a sport which should be done in the confines of a sport, like boxing, like wrestling. All are all sports and can't be used in self-defense.
That's interesting.
I thought you were going to say that. I'm glad to keep getting that,
Well,
that reaction from you.
I mean, it's self-defense. I mean, if someone's trying to end your life, I mean, surely
End your life.
kind of goes.
I can think of a few ways how I can try to help myself not end my life, not you. And I don't know any martial arts. So, but what you have to remember in martial arts, as far as I'm aware, a lot of their points are bang, bang. I can think push out the way, which doesn't cause an injury. See, what I've learned many, 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 many aspects of self-defense. Yeah. And some of them quite interesting that I get back as well. What is the one thing you can do to make sure you don't get injured? Make sure that you are, I
was just say ground your opponent so they can't do anything.
Yeah, that's what I thought. How about having space that's more than an arm's length? Because then they can't punch you, can't stab you. Okay, you could say you could get shot, but you've got to be bloody unlucky if that's happening at the moment. But if you've got space where you can turn and run, you're never going to get hurt. Whereas martial arts dictate that you go in and do that to a person, which if you get it wrong, somebody is on MDMA, which means they're not feeling pain. Martial arts ain't going to do it. So that theory what I just told you guarantees not getting hurt. Martial arts.
It's true. Let's move it forward.
Yep.
What would you say was your most challenging moment working for the police?
Wow, that's a very good question. Most challenging is probably emotion, dealing with emotion. Because once the emotion, you get that out, you can then be professional in what you do. I don't mean emotion in people calling me names. I'm talking about you go to a murder scene and you're emotional about what's happened. You've got someone who turns around and said they've just been seriously sexually assaulted, if you know what I mean. The emotion comes in because you're a human being, but once the emotion goes out of it, you can actually deal with it properly and deal with them all. So that's probably one of them. Yeah, there's probably one is the emotion of dealing with an incident. Because you want to deal with the incident as quickly as possible.
What was your proudest moment as a police officer?
Proudest moment, the first one that comes up, which was one I was going to tell you earlier as well. I'm going to tell you the whole story as well. An old lady phoned up 999 thinking she'd be broken into. And I turned up. And the relief on her face to see that police had turned up, I obviously made sure she was okay. I gave her what she wanted. Spent quite a lot of time there. And I actually reassured her that it must have been an animal and there was no problem there, but I'll stay a little bit longer in case there's anything else you could think of. But the sheer, not joy, but going from shaking to being more comfortable that I'd arrived probably is one of the biggest things I had. I'm going to tell you a little story, which is the first time I've ever done it. Not proud in some ways, but her back door had actually been scraped. I knew someone did try and get in. But I told her it was a fox because I didn't want to overpanic. Now, at the time, it was actually working in South London. I actually, because I'd lied to make sure she was okay, I think she was sent. I did generally check to make sure that she wasn't a repeat victim of other burglaries, other criminal damage. And there was no other offences, and she certainly lived another 6 years. So thankfully for that. So that's one of the reasons why I joined the police. I know you've got to bang out burglars to stop it happening. But that old lady, she was the most important person in the world at that moment.
Thanks for sharing. What do you think the future of policing will look like?
Nothing like they look like now. But I think someone's got to be bold enough to do it. I think at the moment you've got a certain amount of, I know this paper is already going through, so this is nothing new if anyone wants to look it up. Too many police services. You need to bring them down. I know that police officers themselves don't necessarily like the idea. Chief constables are getting round to it. But, for example, the Met, it's too big. Too big. You need to break it down to, say, 4 independent police units of the Met so it's more accountable. How do you think you can actually run and deal with, let's say, 35,000 police officers? All of them were going to be doing something each day that involves another human being, whether it's restraint, handcuffs, things like that. And how can you actually deal with that? So I think they have to restructure so that any person that's investigated in charge deal with smaller numbers. So you just break it up open. That's the way I would see things are going to go. But I think I might be slightly tarnished in the fact that I've already read the white paper, the fact that this is something that they're thinking about doing. et cetera, et cetera. But I also think they need to look much more into AI. They need to look in social media, the offences online and things like that. I think policing and crime in the UK currently is nothing like what will be in 5 or 6 years.
How exactly would AI be used in the context of modern policing?
I don't overly know, but I know that AI is being used currently at the police, but I just don't know how and why. I might find out for our next interview or something like that. But I think they're going to have to introduce all these things as well, like drones. There is a law on drones, but the law isn't strong enough. AI is currently on a computer. At the moment, you can do something for harassment and theft of electricity on a computer. I don't know if you probably didn't think of that. Because if you use a computer, it's plugged. And if you use a computer wrong, theft of electricity, because you're not using the computer correctly. So you've got theft of electricity and Telecommunications Act if you're using things in the wrong way. How do I see some AI moving forward? Let me give you a true instance. It just happened in America. There was a person, I believe he's famous, but I can't remember the details now. And he's been accused of rape. And he's actually said it's not him. And he's actually got the image and put someone else's head on his image. And would you believe a jury in the States has believed it? And he got not guilty on it. So I do see mega, as much as the technology we've got at the moment could be some of the best in the world. But what you've got to remember, for all technology, you're going to get people out there who are up to no good, who are going to use it to their advantage. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of scares me a little bit.
Yeah, it is scary.
It's a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or can be. But I think if we're in front of it, things will make a lot more easier than negative. And I do like to think it's positive because we've got all these resources, all these things we can use. And I think we've got to use them better moving forward type things well. Mind you, I say that, and we have the first, as far as I'm aware, I'm not into politics really, but I noticed that everyone kept blaming politicians for not being more, social media.
Mm-hmm.
And Andy Burnham, as far as I'm aware, did a video of him at a pub last week and he got slaughtered for it. So I don't think people can win either.
Interesting. What advice could you give to people wanting to become police officers?
Do it because you're doing it for the right reason. My niece wants to become a police officer for Thames Valley Police. And I've told her want to do it for the right reason. If you can write down why you want to do it and then look to see if you can achieve those goals, then please do it. And if anyone ever put down, because I'll have a warrant card, go to Tesco's, do any other job other than the police, because that's not the point of being a police officer. If you want to help people, well done, welcome, please. Because the minute you want to help somebody, you're already on the right path, because helping people involves lots of other people. It's the minute, if someone turns around to me and says, I want to roll over the floor and get that murderer into custody, don't join. It's not what you're there for. You're there to keep people safe. Rolling over the floor to make sure you capture a murderer, make sure you do keep the streets safe. Yes, but that's not your primary. Your primary is to keep everyone safe. And if you do that, and they've got the energy and the thought of knowing how to learn the law, I think.
Thanks for sharing. Now, as I understand, you retired from the police, and you now work as a private investigator. Is that correct?
Yes, that kind of work.
Is it what you imagined it would be?
Not at the very beginning, no. I very nearly jacked it in at the very, very beginning because it was more networking than anything else. There is work for private, and the aspect that I like from it is that you're not being controlled by government. You're not being controlled by politics. You're being controlled by the facts, the evidence, and whatever someone wants to pay you in terms of finding that out. There tends to be more private investigators abroad than here, because abroad they are actually got insurance because they're covered by licenses. So just a very, very brief one. Back when Theresa May, we remember her, when she was the Home Secretary, she wanted to make sure that all security officers out like the so-called bouncers, they were all licensed to make sure they were insured in case it hurt anybody. And she was also going to license private investigators at that time. She didn't license private investigators, but she did license the door supervisors, why that industry's changed. So I'll give a lot of advice out there, a lot of advice to security. But my work is all private security, and I feel that the balance has changed from public and government to private. Let's give someone a chance, because there's other people that can't get into the police. They want to become other things. And as long as they're getting it for the right reason, again, then I think they're going to have a good.
So do you have to have been a police officer to become a private investigator, or is that not the case?
No, it just means that basically, if I was to write a piece, promote myself, I can say I was a detective for 10 years, police officer for 20 years, and hopefully that gives me a job over somebody else. I've already done a PI course, so I can put all that down. So you don't have to in any way, shape or form. I suppose technically speaking, it's like everything, isn't it? If you want to learn about crime, you might want to speak to a criminal. They know better just as much. If you want to learn how to catch somebody, you speak to a police officer. But that doesn't mean to say that people out there aren't good enough to do private investigation work. So anyone can bring something to the
Police ever hire you in a case?
Oh, for a private investigator case?
Yeah.
No, because they do it differently. Generally speaking, private investigator only deal with civil cases. So you deal with, what's the best way to describe it? My partner's having an affair. Can you provide me the evidence to take him to a divorce? That's the kind of thing. I've lent a piece of equipment to somebody. They say they haven't got it. Can you provide the evidence they've got it? That's not theft. That's civil. They've taken possession by civil. So all private investigators only ever deal with civil aspects, whether it's divorce, someone who's querying the ownership of property, things like that. So that's how that would all be dealt with. And then, so it's a completely different scenario in total. By far, the most exciting was the police, but you can't do police.
I was going to say, because in TV and film, they've obviously painted a very different idea of what it is to be a PI. Because you have PIs like investigating murders and stuff, and you're saying, well, that's not the case. You can't do that.
Not in the slightest. No, not in the slightest. There's a thing that a good friend of mine, actually, she decided in America, if someone doesn't turn up for court, they've got this kind of bond they have. They set out, said, so you've got bond people, don't you? And there's a famous one whose name I can't remember. That's all in America. That doesn't happen in the only the police are allowed to arrest people that are wanted of things, whereas a bond. Yeah,
I remember it's that bounty hunters.
I think he had long. Yeah. That's the one. Yeah. So out in America, you can arrest somebody, take them to court, and the police must provide the bond, and you get paid your wages for bringing someone before the court who goes to. That system isn't here.
You can't do citizens arrest here in the UK. That's not a thing.
You can do citizens arrest, but you have to know that they are wanted. And you don't, what happens if they appear? If, for example, you see Mr. A, let's just say Mr. A, okay? So we can go back to that a bit in a minute. I'm just going to give the example to finish off this story. You see Mr. A, you know that he failed to appear at court last week. You want to put him for the So you take him, you grab him, you take him in, put him for the court. You saw him at 10 o'clock this morning. He's been dealt with. You're now guilty of his assault and forcing. So you've got to know he's committed the offence, i.e. you've seen him get the mobile phone out of her pocket, put it into his pocket, go to run. I know he's just done it and he's in my eye. I can then arrest him. That's my citizen's arrest. If he picks the the phone and he runs off and you let's say he leaves. 2 minutes later, around the corner, you see him. You go grab hold of him. I'm arresting you for the assault for mobile phone, but it worked. And the CCTV proves it weren't him because you've lost sight. That's not
bad.
So that's why, if I may, I'll go back very briefly, just in case there's other questions you want. Recently, there's been this cyclist, I believe he's food delivery. But what he does is when he sees someone nicking a phone, he sprays them with red paint.
Seen this.
Have you seen that one? Good, fantastic. And then he rides off or he calls the police, please come down. I think it's very good headlines, and I'm really glad people are getting caught if they're getting caught. But I can also see the negative of that. So the first one happens. What happens if someone turns around and goes to him, come on in, I want it, come on. He's not got the skill set or the tools on him to defend himself. So he's got that element, and then at that point, the police are dealing with 2 incidents, not the one. The second one on top of that, he can be arrested for criminal damage. Because he sprayed their clothing. The clothing's damaged. There's nothing in law that says you're allowed to do.
Is it not assault? How would it be criminal damage?
He's damaged the clothing.
Oh.
If you can't get the paint off the clothing, you've damaged the clothing. That's common. That's criminal damage. It can be assault as well. I'm glad you brought that up. It can be assault as well. But without getting too technical, because I feel like I'm really getting technical now.
I love it.
So do I, just to let you know. The other part of this is identification.
Okay.
You've got to be able to identify that person who's committed that phone, and the victim has to have the chance under law to say yes or no, he did it. Now, I know it's when the backs are turned. I get that. But under law, if you read it up, it would say the victim must have the opportunity to identify their assailant. All right. So you'll put 4 people in front of her, him or her, by the way, I just said her, him or, because the last one I saw was her. But one of them's got red paint all over him. Is that, if I was a solicitor, I would say that's not an impartial ID parade because she knows who's done. So there can never be a street ID parade ever, which means all the evidence is out the window by him spraying.
Well, there you go. You can't take justice into your own hands.
You can't. The other one that I had was this. I actually did this myself, and I learnt my lesson from it. Was when we actually had someone who had assaulted somebody. This was many, many years ago. They was in the police car, put me in the police car, and the victim was around the corner. We said, "Well, can you get the victim back round and make sure we got the right one?" And they brought them around and said, "That's the one." And the solicitor at the police station said, "Yeah, but she's going to say it's the one. She's in a police car. That's not a true identity." Case got thrown out. Couldn't use it. So that's where I learned that.
Wow. Let's move it forward. I want to talk about just briefly this after dinner speaking, because the only time I've ever heard about this has been, a retired police officer, or it might be someone who's had like a long career in a particular field and they get paid to come to an event and speak. And normally it's, after the dinner or during it. Walk me through this. How did you get into this?
Right. Well, basically, I was having a little bit of a break from all of it. And I got asked by 2 charities. One that I do a lot of work for, which is a Poppy Appeal. Amazing charity, done a lot of work for them. And they said, we want to do something different. On a Saturday night, we normally have a band in. Why don't you come in, stand up on stage and do a true crime thing to see what the audience are like. I said, I'll do one better than that. I'll do a Q&A at the end of it, which no one else does. So you can ask me any questions you want, where it's personal, interested, media, headlines, and I'll do a 20-minute stand-up Q&A as well as other stories. So I have 3 different types that I can do, all different crime situations, how they were solved. The most interesting, obviously, was I like to do mine for about 2 hours, but most people to get on stage. So I've done a couple there for them and got really good reviews, but I haven't done them so much more recently. And I did one for a Freemason, which I didn't know they were a Freemason, to be honest with you. I'm not going to get into politics or whether we like them or not, but it just happened to be in Surbiton. They asked me to go along and do an after dinner thingy. And again, I did that and I got some good reviews. And if I'm honest, outside of a couple of the ideas that I told you about when I was in the police, where victims come up to me and said, are you okay and stuff? The biggest applause or best reviews I got was telling people the stories and giving the unique Q&As at the end of it. So I was really enjoying that. I know that although there are different people who give different speeches out there, some of them are actually not involved with the actual investigations as well, but some of them will be obviously still doing that. But any kind of event where you need something different, I think, is the best way to describe it. But I will definitely do a couple of hours and always get multiple questions at the end of it, which means if you want to stay till 1 o'clock, I'm more than happy to do it because I actually find it quite exciting.
I'd pay to go something like that. That sounds fascinating.
Bless you.
Genuinely. What would you say some of the most memorable experiences you've had doing the after dinner speaking?
Was really when people come up to you, speak to you afterwards, they shake your hand and things like that. And that's why I said at the beginning, when they shake my hand, I think they shake the hand of everybody in the police because that's what you're dealing with from there. I'm just the lucky one that's able to give I don't like to give opinion. I like to give more fact than opinion because everyone can give an opinion, but people can't beat a fact. I like to be able to do that. So you have to acknowledge there are bad in the police, but you also have to acknowledge the good that they do. But you tend to find people really enjoy it because rather than coming up with a book, which don't get me wrong, they are fantastic. I can't think the author I was going to say now, but some of the books are fantastic. They're not real. So I think there's a space there for true crime, how it investigated, how it was dealt with, and you go from there. Do you know the story that, I'm going to give you 2 quick stories if I may. One of the story that people like the most, I shouldn't do this because this is part of the act, but I'll do it just for you, okay? One of the stories was we went to South London where there has been a murder and they'd driven off in a car as far as we're aware because they couldn't have got away without a car. And this was early evening, for want of a better word, or late afternoon, sorry, and we got there. And we spoke to a load of people. There's not many people about, but we spoke to a few a few houses who didn't know anything. There's no CCTV there at all. And it's really only witnesses and neighbours and things like that. So we looked down the list of all we spoke to. People said it happened at 6:37. All these kind of, why has the lady at number 10 not been spoken to? Yeah, but she's a bit old, she's about 80. She doesn't really know what she's doing. She changed the subject and things like that. We thought it was best to keep her away. I said, so we're the murder squad. We've got to deal with these things, but you're not going to talk to number 10. Well, again, as we said, etc., etc. I said, well, what we got? And we said, well, the time is between 6 and 8 o'clock. We don't know which in between. We don't know what direction they went off, and we believe it's a vehicle. Okay, then. So of all the work we've done here, we know we haven't really found a lot in our gold. So I went and spoke to her, knocked on the door. She comes to, yeah, nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. I just want to come and quickly say hello to you and just tell you that we're doing an investigation up the road. And want to see if you've seen anything. Oh, sure, you'll probably want to know about the car that drove past my. Yes, please. Would you like tea? 2 cups, please. Went into her house, and she turned around and said, the car drove past the front of my house at 10 to 8. We've actually got a time now. Can I ask you, how do you know it's 10 to 8 when everyone else said it's 7 o'clock? Because I was making a cup of tea for his. Can't get any better than that. It's Monday evening. His then starts at 8 o'clock. Can't get any better than that. So I've got more evidence from her than any of the rest of the day going. And this was the house that no one was going to knock at. We dealt with it. Eventually got found out it was a red car. Won't go into too much more, but it's all public. But it's not always the people you think who are going to supply the most evidence. And in that half an hour, I gained more than probably 6 hours of walking around the streets. So just show you. So that's one of the cases that really spring open to mind. The person was arrested and he did get convicted. She only got 16 years for that particular murder, but it's 16 years which we wouldn't have identified. And that's
crazy, that,
isn't it?
There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
No problem.
A couple of final quickfire questions for you. Let's go. What did working for the police teach you about life?
It's enjoy every moment whenever you can get it. I think you've got to really do it. I think most people, victims of crime as well, will tell you that. Life's too short. Please just enjoy it while you can.
What's the worst advice you've ever received?
So I'm going to tell you a little story now.
Sure.
It's better. There was a case, well, previously when people got arrested, they get handcuffed at the back and get taken to a police station. Okay. So I actually decided that when you've got either a sexual offence or a murder, things are going to be on your hand, blood, residue from a gun, all these sort of things. Fluids can be on your hands and things like that. But previously, the mat didn't cover the hands. So I decided to put plastic evidence bags over the hand and sellotape it to the handcuff. So when they got in, take the bone out, straight to forensics. There you got. You've got a preserved hand from the minute you're arrested to the minute it goes exactly. That is now a done procedure, done complete procedure. And I thought, not. My first detective sergeant ordered me to take those bags off his hand. That's probably the worst thing I ever got told because I knew I was doing the right thing. That's probably one of the worst things I've ever been told.
How much heat do you get for that?
Well, at the time,
yeah,
exactly. But the funny thing is now it's a done thing. Now in the Met, they have to do it. It's a process because a case went to the Old Bailey and the judge turned around and said, you will do that in future. I thought, well, I was one of the pioneers for that. So I'm quite proud of it.
Oh, there you go.
Yes.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, good. That's a very good question. Do you know what? It's going back to what we mentioned before. Make sure that you're safe. Keep watching people's hands. And if you keep a distance away from them, no matter what they're hiding in their pockets, do it. Give yourself a second to watch out. There's the amount of officers that have been stabbed, injured, hate to say the word, being killed in line of duty. I'm not saying any of them could have been prevented, but obviously make sure you got space to make sure you don't get injured. And safety is probably one of the biggest ones that you.
What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
Don't take everything everyone says as gospel. I like to listen to everybody, take on board what they're saying, and trust everyone until I know any different. You can't always believe everything everyone says. And the reason I say that, part of my work was interviewing prisoners in a prison because they commit an offence, got found guilty. We later find out they've committed one between their arrest and going to prison. So they've got other outstanding crimes they need to speak to. So I have gone into prisoners, etc., etc. Most prisoners in prison will tell me they're not guilty. They're innocent. There was a recent study come up in 2024 that said that there cannot be physically more than 8% of prisoners who are not being got correct justice. Whenever I've interviewed them, it must be 90 people saying they're not guilty of these crimes. So take what you want from people with a piece of story in the professional world, because they'll always want to tell you a story that might not necessarily be true. And it's down to you to establish what ones aren't telling the truth so you can arrest them, or what ones are telling the truth so you can be their best. So you bring that skill out into the open and make sure that you can trust somebody. Because that's trust, I think, the biggest thing you can ever have in life, and make sure that you can get that from what.
Final question for you for today. Do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh, wow. No, I think I've given a lot out. If people, when they've watched this and listened to it, they'll have a really good, a new understanding of what's gone on. Because of the nature of it is over 20 years, it would be lovely to bore you again. I hope you haven't fallen asleep in this podcast, though.
Would love to. Love to.
And we could do that with the next part on, for example. But I hope people can enjoy what I've said, learn from what I've said, and maybe got a better impression of what it's like in the police, rather than just the media, if you've got newspapers and news outlets, that sometimes have an own agenda. But I've thoroughly enjoyed working, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this interview. It's been such a wonderful period of time talking.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for appearing on the show and being just very open with us about everything. Thank you.
Very,
and also,
very proud to.
It's been a pleasure. I'd love to have you back on the show. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a great time. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem. And a massive thank you to James, aka Gay Elvis, for putting this show together. Thank you. Couldn't have done it without you. And to all the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, as always, I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. I'll make sure to include any links for Danny and his work in the description. And as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Don't work like they used to. Can't place your bets on the 9 to 5. Things don't work like they used to. No, there's not enough to keep you alive.